This is Chapter 27 of Following the Equator by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Following the Equator by Mark Twain, Chapter 27. The South Pole Swell, Tasmania, Extermination of the Natives, the Picture Proclamation, the Conciliator, the Formidable 16. Man is the only animal that blushes, or needs to. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. The universal brotherhood of man is our most precious possession, what there is of it. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. From Diary, November 1, noon. A fine day, a brilliant sun, warm in the sun, cold in the shade, an icy breeze blowing out of the south, a solemn long swell rolling up northward. It comes from the South Pole, with nothing in the way to obstruct its march and tone its energy down. I have read somewhere that an acute observer among the early explorers, Cook or Tasman, accepted this majestic swell as trustworthy circumstantial evidence that no important land lay to the southward, and so did not waste time on a useless quest in that direction, but changed his course and went searching elsewhere. Afternoon. Passing between Tasmania, formerly Van Diemen's Land, and neighboring islands whence the poor exiled Tasmanian savages used to gaze at their lost homeland and cry, and die of broken hearts. How glad I am that all these native races are dead and gone, or nearly so. The work was mercifully swift and horrible in some portions of Australia. As far as Tasmania is concerned, the extermination was complete. Not a native is left. It was a strife of years, and decades of years. The whites and the blacks hunted each other, ambushed each other, butchered each other. The blacks were not numerous, but they were wary, alert, cunning, and they knew their country well. They lasted a long time, few as they were, and inflicted much slaughter upon the whites. The government wanted to save the blacks from ultimate extermination, if possible. One of its schemes was to capture them and coop them up on a neighboring island under guard. Bodies of whites volunteered for the hunt, for the pay was good, £5 for each black captured and delivered, but the success achieved was not very satisfactory. The black was naked and his body was greased. It was hard to get a grip on him that would hold. The whites moved about in armed bodies and surprised little families of natives, and did make captures, but it was suspected that in these surprises half a dozen natives were killed to one caught, and that was not what the government desired. Another scheme was to drive the natives into a corner of the island and fence them in by a cordon of men placed in line across the country. But the natives managed to slip through constantly and continue their murders and arsons. The governor warned these unlettered savages by printed proclamation that they must stay in the desolate region officially appointed for them. The proclamation was a dead letter. The savages could not read it. Afterward a picture proclamation was issued. It was painted up on boards, and these were nailed to trees in the forest. Herewith is a photographic reproduction of this fashion plate. Substantially it means: 1. The governor wishes the whites and the blacks to love each other. 2. He loves his black subjects. 3. Blacks who kill whites will be hanged. 4. Whites who kill blacks will be hanged. Upon its several schemes the government spent £30,000, and employed the labors and ingenuities of several thousand whites for a long time, with failure as a result. Then at last, a quarter of a century after the beginning of the troubles between the two races, the right man was found. No, he found himself. This was George Augustus Robinson, called in history the Conciliator. He was not educated, and not conspicuous in any way. He was a working bricklayer in Hobart Town. But he must have been an amazing personality, a man worth traveling far to see. It may be his counterpart appears in history, but I do not know where to look for it. He set himself this incredible task: to go out into the wilderness, the jungle, and the mountain retreats where the hunted and implacable savages were hidden, and appear among them unarmed, speak the language of love and of kindness to them, and persuade them to forsake their homes and the wild free life that was so dear to them, and go with him and surrender to the hated whites, and live under their watch and ward, and upon their charity, the rest of their lives. On its face it was the dream of a madman. In the beginning his moral suasion project was sarcastically dubbed the sugar-plum speculation. If the scheme was striking, and new to the world's experience, the situation was not less so. It was this: the white population numbered 40,000 in 1831, the black population numbered 300. Not 300 warriors, but 300 men, women, and children. The whites were armed with guns, the blacks with clubs and spears. The whites had fought the blacks for a quarter of a century, and had tried every thinkable way to capture, kill, or subdue them, and could not do it. If white men of any race could have done it, these would have accomplished it. But every scheme had failed. The splendid 300, the matchless 300, were unconquered and manifestly unconquerable. They would not yield, they would listen to no terms, they would fight to the bitter end. Yet they had no poet to keep up their heart, and sing the marvel of their magnificent patriotism. At the end of 25 years of hard fighting, the surviving 300 naked patriots were still defiant, still persistent, still efficacious with their rude weapons, and the governor and the 40,000 knew not which way to turn, nor what to do. Then the bricklayer, that wonderful man, proposed to go out into the wilderness, with no weapon but his tongue, and no protection but his honest eye and his humane heart, and track those embittered savages to their lairs in the gloomy forests and among the mountain snows. Naturally he was considered a crank, but he was not quite that. In fact, he was a good way short of that. He was building upon his long and intimate knowledge of the native character. The deriders of his project were right, from their standpoint, for they believed the natives to be mere wild beasts, and Robinson was right, from his standpoint, for he believed the natives to be human beings. The truth did really lie between the two. The event proved that Robinson's judgment was soundest, but about once a month for 4 years the event came near to giving the verdict to the deriders, for about that frequently Robinson barely escaped falling under the native spears. But history shows that he had a thinking head, and was not a mere wild sentimentalist. For instance, he wanted the war parties called in before he started unarmed upon his mission of peace. He wanted the best chance of success, not a half chance, and he was very willing to have help, and so high rewards were advertised for any who would go unarmed with him. This opportunity was declined. Robinson persuaded some tamed natives of both sexes to go with him, a strong evidence of his persuasive powers, for those natives well knew that their destruction would be almost certain. As it turned out, they had to face death over and over again. Robinson and his little party had a difficult undertaking upon their hands. They could not ride off horseback comfortably into the woods and call Leonidas and his 300 together for a talk and a treaty the following day, for the wild men were not in a body. They were scattered, immense distances apart, over regions so desolate that even the birds could not make a living with the chances offered, scattered in groups of 20, a dozen, half a dozen, even in groups of 3. And the mission must go on foot. Mr. Bonwick furnishes a description of those horrible regions, whereby it will be seen that even fugitive gangs of the hardiest and choicest human devils the world has seen, the convicts set apart to people the hell of Macquarie Harbor Station, were never able but once to survive the horrors of a march through them, but starving and struggling and fainting and failing, ate each other and died. Onward, still onward, was the order of the indomitable Robinson. No one ignorant of the western country of Tasmania can form a correct idea of the traveling difficulties. While I was resident in Hobart Town, the governor, Sir John Franklin, and his lady undertook the western journey to Macquarie Harbor, and suffered terribly. One man who assisted to carry her ladyship through the swamps gave me his bitter experience of its miseries. Several were disabled for life. No wonder